consent agenda. For the consent items, I'll read out the title associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda. Members of General Committee may ask that an item be held to discuss the matter further. If an item isn't held, the motion is deemed to be approved on consent. No further discussion of the item will take place at General Committee, and it will go forward to City Council for consideration this evening. So deferral 4.1, the deferred motion 23-G-021-2023, Business Plan and Budget, Barrie Police Services Board.
Hold, please.
Held by Councillor Hamilton. Deferral 4.2, defer motion 23-G-022-2023, Business Plan and Budget, Service Partners.
Hold, please.
Held by Councillor Harvey. Okay, we will now move directly into 4.1. So, Councillor Hamilton, you held the matter. If you could put the item on the floor, and then I will recognize Councillor Harvey after that.
Okay. Putting the item on the floor as printed.
Perfect. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. In order to meet my legislative requirements under Section 17, Sub 3 of the Police Services Act, I will not participate in the discussion or the vote on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Madam Clerk, is the conflict being noted?
Yes, Mayor Nuttall, it has been.
Thank you. And Councillor Hamilton.
Okay. So I do support the budget as presented. I think given the data that was shared with us last time, comparing us to other similar size municipalities and numbers of boots on the ground, I think it is a worthwhile investment to I know in the business plan here it was 4 additional officers. So pleased to see that. I do just want to say, and I also want to comment that I've been very, very pleased in terms of the level of willingness and collaboration shown by the Barrie Police Services. I've been working with them quite closely in my community, and I think that partnership has been quite positive. So just want to point that out. I think my question is one in the essence of learning. I want to confirm that in the last 10, 15 years, I believe that the city has never questioned or gone into negotiation with the Barrie Police Service on the budget that they've presented. And I want to understand that if we were to enter negotiations, if I can confirm that the process would be we would enter into arbitration, and at that point the budget could be increased or decreased. And so that's something that city needs to be aware of when we're looking at these budgets in terms of what next steps would be. So I just want to confirm that would be the process.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. CAO Prowse, if you could perhaps answer that question for us.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I think I'd defer to the clerk at this point and may offer some additional thoughts.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton. Correct. The City Council cannot pick out line by line reductions or increases to the police services budget. I'm just searching in the Police Services Act. I believe that it would go to arbitration if we did try to make any changes to their budget, increase or decrease. Generally, if council did want to make a request for any changes to their budget, it would be through their Police Services Board that they could make a request. And the police could say yes or no, but it would be just a general request, not a specific line item request.
Thank you, and through you, I just think that's important for the public to know. I certainly did not know that before joining council in terms of what that process looks like. So I think it's just important to clarify expectations from a public point of view. And then secondly, I just want to comment, when we received the presentation last time from the chief, I did ask the question in terms of the proportion of budget or salary spent on boots on the ground versus administration. And the reason I asked that, again, working in a public sector, I know sometimes there's a tendency for us to inflate administration. And I'm not saying that's been done here at all, but I think certainly it's something that we need to be mindful of, especially in our pursuit of good governance and having good financial oversight. So I would suggest going forward, I hope that we can seek out this information so we can make the appropriate analysis and comparison and make sure that we're not, again, going down the path of inflating from an administration perspective, and that we're investing in boots on the ground, because that's certainly what our city needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the motion on the floor? Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and thank you, Councillor Hamilton, for raising this. I think, we've changed chiefs, and obviously with Chief Greenwood prior, there's a lot of work in Barrie happening in the area of evidence-based policing. And I asked that question of Chief Johnson when he was here. And I think this is really going to bode well for us in the future as we understand better how much policing, where do you police, and what is the ultimate cost of policing? Are we reducing harm in our community? So I'm really happy that Chief Johnson is a strong ally of evidence-based policing, and that throughout the force they are taking this very seriously. So we will see a higher degree of professionalism and evidence driving, data driving how we invest in policing. So we'll have a better understanding of what we're getting for our tax dollars. So I'm really hopeful for the future of Barrie Police Services and using evidence-based policing to inform our investments. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Corser.
Yes, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Hamilton was saying. I'm looking forward to having much more transparency next year when we sit down to the budget to see exactly where the money is being spent and in what way, as long as it doesn't conflict with safety or security of the force.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. With Councillor Hamilton, she was asking specifically about the boots on the ground, maybe to quote you, that's a versus, well, I'll put it in my own words. Those who are out doing the job on the street versus the white shirts in the third floor or second floor of the police station. Is there something else besides that you'd like to see come back when you're talking about transparency? Because I think it's important that we do that now, right? Like, if we want to communicate something, let's get it out so that your representatives on the police board, there's two of them here, there's another one that's the chair of the police board, can then actually try to go and get that information for you and bring it back to you.
Thank you. I was advised that I could bring that forward in June with direction for the new budget.
Sure. I think June will be fine, although I do believe that the police budget is prepared much sooner than the city's budget. In fact, the current police budget was prepared by the previous mayor and police services board. So we might want to come back a little bit before June. I would actually ask Deputy Mayor Thompson if you can provide a little bit more clarity on that.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Nuttall. Yeah, so you are correct. The police budget, I think, starts in May. The deliberations and stuff there's a subcommittee of the board. So what I would do is I would probably email the board chair and just kind of lay out what you'd like to see in the transparency prior to the direction in council.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much. Okay,
are there any other comments or questions around the table? Councillor Ritma, and then we'll go to Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would like to add my voice to the list of things that I would like to see from the police in the next budget. I've heard a lot about evidence-based policing. The problem is I'm not sure that there's any good evidence that says more policing makes people safer. And that's where I wrestle with it. I would be happy with this budget if it continued the trend that we have seen in the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, whereby this police budget is a lower percentage every year of the city's budget. But for the first time in a long time, this budget has increased about 0.3% of the whole city budget, And I think that's going in the wrong direction. And my view of it is that I would very much like to see the police shifting from a enforcement operation to much more of getting to the root of the problem operation. And I don't see that in this direction. And I think that a lot of policing needs to be done by avoidance and not getting to the root of the problem. And I'm not sure that this is the direction that this force is going. And I would prefer to see us spending, or see the police spending more of their time and money in more the social services part of it. And maybe that's not their job description, I don't know. But somebody needs to do that. And I think that that's where we need to focus resources. And I would ask the police board and through our representatives there to try to shift the focus of policing much more to the prevention, crime prevention model and dealing with some of the root causes. And if, of course, as a city, we can support that, I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rittman. Just one quick note. The police board, neither the police board nor council is in charge of anything operational within inside the police department. That's just not what the Police Services Act outlines. So we can make requests and we can ask for things to be considered, but they're not determined by either the police board or city council.
I realize that full well.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and I agree with many of the things that Councillor Rietma has brought forward. I agree that we cannot direct the police to do certain things, but I can only hope, and I agree that we need to work in that direction. I would like to see that as well, and I hope and I'm confident that that's the direction they are going. But we do need more boots on the ground, as Councillor Hamilton stated, just to be aware of what is going downtown, or what is going on, especially in our downtown core. We are in a extremely critical situation right now, as everyone who operates businesses or lives downtown reminds me on a daily basis, and we need to do something about that, and I certainly hope that, and I'm confident that Chief Johnson shares that, and hopefully should this budget pass, that some of those funds will go to putting more bodies out there, meeting the public downtown, and to improve the perception that we have, as well as provide increased safety to those most vulnerable, who are down there, who are most often the victims of incidents. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Are there any other comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So this is where we wear two hats. I sit on the board and we sit there, and then I come to council. And to echo Councillor Hamilton's points, you know, this is a very large ask, and I'm aware of that. But some of the things that we have to highlight, it is about hiring more officers, bringing the complement to the strategic plan of the police, and trying to Councillor Harris's point about the evidence-based policing. And, you know, there's theories that, you know, more policing doesn't, you know, less crime or safety. But there are proven points that less policing actually endangers neighborhoods. And we're seeing that globally in a lot of states where the defund the police model has actually been very, very challenging for communities. So basically what I'm trying to say is it's more of a statement that I'm not happy with the 7% budget increase, but I am aware that it is necessary. But I also don't want to see this on a year-to-year basis, to cutting the administration, the civilianization of certain positions while maintaining boots on the ground where our residents and people feel safe. And, I need to see results with this budget. And, if we don't see the results that, most councillors are looking for, then I think next year's budget will be extremely challenging for the police. So, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is there any other comments or questions from members of committee? Councillor Harris.
Yeah, maybe just a quick comment. And I think in policing, and again, I declare I've been taking the University of Cambridge evidence-based policing course, and directed by former Deputy Chief Johnson and actually now Chief Johnson. And often, people will share opinion. And what we're trying to do here through policing, evidence-based policing, what our chief is doing is trying to use evidence, data, and to really inform what they do. And policing, and in the course, they talk about policing often resources, the finite resources being allocated by the highest paid person's opinion. So good news, our highest paid person's opinion is being deferred to evidence now. So that's a really great place to start from the top. So I think, so those of us also who are learning and responsible, I took the course because it's their biggest budget line. I wanted to learn more about policing. So, we're going to hopefully not be using experience, intuition, and opinion. We're going to be using data and evidence to inform our biggest operating line. So, I'd encourage council to, if you're sharing your opinion, I hope it's a researched, evidence-based opinion, because that's what the police are going to work with. So, I'm looking forward again to the upcoming years and having more evidence, more information, more data to inform this very large and important service investment. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Comment, I guess, on this in the framing of what information would be helpful. And I'm supportive of it as it is for some of the things that have been mentioned, but broader appreciating the dynamics of until we can actually look at a system where we can put better policies, practices, and parameters in place. We may not see the police being pulled into situations that might otherwise be viewed as value for money or the best use of resources. And so I guess I would, be it through you, Mayor Nuttall, back to the board, or through you back to the big city mayors, or the reframing as the next budget comes back, I think as a funder, appreciating the changes that are happening at a provincial legislative level that actually have an impact around how police can do policing. So whether that's court diversion, mandates or incentives, or being able to then follow through, and the amount of resources going to scenes and going to be responsive, but then perhaps, I would like to hear, rather than speak on behalf of the police, the view of how effective they believe they can be within the changes to some of the provincial policies that are set. And I think that there's a room for us to consider what is our voice and advocacy around how we understand and then talk a bit about how do we leverage appropriately the resources we have and that we fund, and are there provincial policies that are actually supporting that? Because I think if we don't see funding in health, right, we see, or social services, we're seeing this. So I think we're talking about symptoms that we're funding around many systems that are underfunded or not operating well, and not great legislative policies.
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. Are there any other questions or comments from members of council? Seeing none, there's a few things I wanted to say on this, and I'm going to be very sincere and direct with this. This is not a budget I had any say in, quite frankly, coming forward, which is really easy to blame the person who's before you, right? Because that's the politics of it, right? You get in, you blame the person behind you, and you move on. I actually do support this, and there's a couple of reasons I support the police budget the way it is. The one is the 5 officers. The second one is it's really tough to tell somebody that they're not doing their job correctly, and the results are showing that, if they're not fully funded, because it's easy then for that institution, in this case the police service, to point to the lack of funding. So you give the opportunity and the funding to say, are we actually able to deliver what the expectation is that we as a team around this table, but certainly the public at large has with regards to policing in our community. The other piece I think that we need to be honest and fair about, and you know, I have a line to walk because I sit in both the Police Services Board and here. The line to walk is what I'm referring to is making sure I don't step out on any of our confidential discussions. But I'll say it this way: when you look at the way the Police Services Board is accounted, sorry, the Police Services budget is accounted for versus others within City Hall as service partners, you will see that there's a difference. There's actually a number of differences. Okay, one of them is when the police services are out there and they actually drive revenue, it doesn't go to their bottom line. It goes to court services to be able to, for the city to be able to deal with it. So I think, Ms. McAlpine, am I going to the wrong place here? I might be going to the wrong place. But you do know everything, so I'm going to go to you anyways.
Mayor Nuttall, thank you for the question. Right now, if there are speeding tickets or other highway traffic offenses, Provincial Offences Act charges, those fines are, if they're paid or when they're recovered, are paid to the city. The net cost of operating the court system and the collection of those fines is deducted from those revenues, and those revenues form part of the general revenues of the city that are used to pay for the police service. Do they go directly to the police service? A ticket fine revenue goes directly to the police service? No. But they are paid through the general revenues that the city receives, which include the net revenues from the operation of the courts. And in Barrie's case, we operate the provincial offences court system for Barrie and Orillia court service partners. So we have 20 municipalities that we work with, and we share the net revenues amongst those as determined by the province, that this would be the methodology.
And in that, just to follow up, there is a major deficit, I believe, in that area.
One of the things that that has not been adequately addressed from my personal perspective is the fact that Barrie, as a municipality, because it operates a court within the city, outside of the provincial court system, it operates a civil court system. Barrie Police Service is responsible for providing court security to not only the provincial offences courts that the city operates, but also to provincial courts that deal with civil and family matters and criminal matters. Those costs are not shared with the municipalities whose defendants might be attending those courts. The city and the police service receive some grant revenue to cover a portion of those costs, but it does not cover the full cost of court operations. And that revenue line has not been updated in a number of years.
Thank you, Ms. McAlpine. The other item in the police budget that stood out to me was, and this year I don't believe that there's major capital investments, but capital investments there are some, and they end up coming in through our operating requests. And so it's just important to note that, because although it's coming in through the operating budget, it's not necessarily operating. Having said all that, and Deputy Mayor Thompson, I think that you can probably correct me on this. There's 95%, I think, is related to salaries and benefits. Is that correct? 95%. You know, we're looking at a 7% increase. If nothing happened, no new officers, you know, we'd be sitting somewhere around, pardon? 5.6. It's this is the reality of the police budget. I'm going to hold off on my other comments because there are comments about the police budget that I think don't belong in the police conversation. They actually belong in the county conversation where social services happen. And I don't want, there is a lot of connection, but I think that in terms of our holding account for tax dollars spent, they need to be put in the right place. And so I'll leave it for that. Are there any other just last minute questions or comments before we call the vote? Seeing none. Okay, those in favor on my right and on my left. It carries. We'll now move on to 4.2, which was held by Councillor Harvey, but we need to get Councillor Harvey before he can put it on the floor. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put the item on the floor as printed, and I do have an amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. The item is now on the floor.
Great, thank you. This is in relation to the library budget to amend paragraph 1 by adding the following: that the Barrie Public Library budget be reduced by $228,219, resulting in a reduction to the tax levy of $228,219, keeping their budget at 2022 funding levels. And I can speak to that.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Your amendment's now on the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Obviously, again, we're in another tough year. First, we have the pandemic. Now we've got inflation driving things a little bit out of control. And we've had to make tough decisions here at the city, especially on the operations side, where we had to make some serious cuts. And we've also used a fair amount of reserves to be able to bring us to a 0% for the taxpayers. And in doing so, this is using the same principle that we're now asking one of our service partners that is fully funded by the city, other than some grants and few things that would come from other sources, to also do the same. We're not talking about a huge amount of money. It's $282,000 and change in relation to just over a $9 million budget. And in reviewing and having some conversations in regards to their reserves are very healthy, so they're very easily able to do this as we did as a city. So that's the principle around this. I'm just asking a service partner to do the same as what we've done, and maybe it's some time to maybe even look a little bit deeper as to how they move forward from a financial standpoint. And I'll just leave it at that. I really don't want to say too much about it, but I just think that it's very in line with what we've done on the operations side. And now we're just asking that one of our service partners who has the ability to, because not every service partner does have the ability to be able to do this when it comes to the health of their reserves. However, this one does, and that's why I'm bringing this amendment forward.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Are there other questions or comments around the table? Councillor Corser.
I'm finding myself struggling with some of the information because I am learning. I guess my question would be to, I think, Mr. Miller. How much does the library reserves contribute to new branches?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, I might actually, to answer your question, I may have to defer this one to Mr. Hughes if this is a past a question that on the recent branch that was open that is actually leased. So right now they don't contribute anything to the city's reserves per se. I believe they did make some contributions to the recent branch that was opening, but that came from their own their own sources. So I'm not sure if Mr. Hughes has any insight into that, or he's shaking his head no. So to answer your question, it's nothing directly that goes into the city's reserves from the library.
No, sorry, just for clarity, how much is the library reserves that they have go into new branches compared to what the city donates? I'm sorry, I know I'm asking a question that I don't mean to put you on the spot on this again.
CEO Kraus.
Mayor Nuttall, through you to Councillor Corser, I believe that I have my back to them. I believe representatives from the library are in the audience. They can probably best speak to their financials as the city doesn't run them.
Okay. So, do I ask?
This isn't a meeting where we can have interaction necessarily with the public, but between general committee and city council, I think you could probably speak with the chair and CEO and then have that exact question answered. Are there other questions with regards to or comments? Yes? Okay, keep going then.
And we fund some of the library gets reserves through DCs, is that correct?
So through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, that is correct. So for example, I believe the lease on the Hawley branch is being funded from development charge reserves that we collect for specific services of the library, and there is some funds collected in DCs related to growth of the collection. But again, those DC revenues are related to the growth component.
And if I could follow up with that, what impact, I have a crystal ball, do you feel that would there be a significant impact on library reserves with the complications with Bill 23?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, yes, like overall, with the introduction of Bill 23, there is a delayed deferral of what you can charge, so there's a reduction of 20%. So that applies to all hard and soft services, such as the library services.
And so I feel that the library actually, in this time of difficult families having difficult times paying bills and being able to afford extra activities for their children, and the library supplies so much to our community, and to newcomers to our community, to our city itself, their outreach programs and all the supports that they have that they offer our community for free. Literacy programs for people who are underprivileged in our community. I just don't think this is the right time to be cutting back on funding library services. So I will not be supporting that amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. Are there other comments or questions around the table? Councillor Kunkel.
Thank you. Through you to Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, around tabling the motion. Is there anything that you're aware of that you're able to speak to, save between being able to engage with the library between this meeting and council, as to your view of the reserves? So my biggest question would be, are those reserves allocated or unallocated? So can you give a sense of kind of your justification for, or your consideration of impact to a library, knowing that, when we usually have strains, our rec centers, our libraries, and other areas or places people can go to. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of information I'll at least be seeking out between meetings about what's the impact to service, or is it something they could recover through reserves? Do you have any additional information you can share?
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through you to Councillor Kunkel. So that information was shared earlier. I don't know if everybody saw the email. Again, it was just to provide background information so that way people understood where I was coming from with this amendment. It is public information. I was hoping that we could stay away from starting to talk about numbers here, but it is public information, so the question's being asked, so I don't have a problem in answering it. So their ask this year is just shy of $9.6 million. And their total reserves right now, according to their last financial report and the last updated information that I was able to obtain from the library themselves, shows just over $6.8 million in reserves, with just over 3.4 of it in a tangible capital asset reserve. So that's why I say When you look at it proportionately to what their yearly budget is, their reserves are significant compared to our other service partners. I know I sit on other boards, and when you look at it proportionately, it's extremely healthy. Even if you were to look at the city's reserves, our reserves are not proportionately even close to what this percentage would be. And that's why I feel comfortable in bringing this forward, because I know it will have no impact on the resources, and then it'll be a board decision as to how they deal with this, whether they pull that $282,000 from the reserves or if they decide to deal with it in some other fashion. I want it to be clear, I am an advocate for the library. I wouldn't have brought a library to Hawley. It's just that we're in that tough time right now where we got to make tough decisions. And in the grand scheme of things of $9.6 million, $282,000 is not a big number. If they didn't have reserves to support it, we wouldn't even be having this discussion right now. But the fact that they do have extremely healthy reserves to deal with this, that's why I've brought this forward for discussion.
Thank you. So I think I still have the floor. And I think that's important without getting into the nitty-gritty, but this public-facing information to rationalize kind of that, because I think all of us are looking at what reserves, provincially we're being looked at what reserves we have. And so I think that's good around understanding the rationale for this. And if it's out there, if it can support any information the library can bring back, if there's anything that doesn't align to that we should know about before we motion on this in council later this evening. So from a timing, I thank you for speaking to that, because I think it's important around that being related to the perspective of a reserve and access to funds. And that framing, I would really love to be very protective of this, but I'll look for more information to come between meetings, but in that line of sight and with that justification, I know we're all looking for ways to save, so I will be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Kungl. Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mayor, now I would just clarify one bit of information looking at the financial statements. So they do have a number in there invested in tangible capital assets of $3.4 million. So that actually is assets that they own. So, for example, their book collections is $2.2 million. They have computer equipment, fixed assets. So I would say those are not liquid assets. Those are, you could argue that perhaps they might be, but generally speaking, those are what they own. So it'd be 6.8 minus the 3.4 would be the remaining balance of reserves that they have available and would be able to provide you more information on.
So just to confirm, so instead of about a 65% to operating, they're actually looking at somewhere around 30% to operating.
Well, I'm just saying that the number that was quoted of the 3.4 million, it's actually, those are owned assets. Like they're not, I wouldn't call them a reserve. They own them. They're books.
Right, but I think the total was 6.4, was it not?
So I think it's 6.8 minus
6.823. So instead of
minus the 3.4, so it's
instead of a ratio of 0.7,
it's about 3.3.
Just for clarification, Mr. Miller, uncommitted reserves to our operating, what do we keep in terms of a ratio? We're at about 100 million out of 400 or something like that?
Yeah, I'd have to get back to you with the number, but it's our reserves are pretty fully committed. I can get back to the number.
When the accountant mumbles answering the question, you know there's something wrong. I'm just kidding, Mr. Miller. Okay, Councillor Harvey, and then are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, yes, you are correct, Mr. Miller. I was actually reading off the wrong line, but it still basically works out to a tally of that 3.4. I guess I just want to clarify the one DC reserve type of question that Councillor Corser had asked earlier. So just to kind of clarify it so that way everybody kind of understands. So we have a DC reserve on the city side that's specific to libraries, and this other reserve that I'm speaking to is a reserve that is held by the city of, or the Barrie Public Library.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? It carries. So we're now back on the main motion. Are there any other amendments to the motion? Councillor Harvey, do you have any other amendments?
Right here. It's the county.
Okay, so this one's in relation to the county of Simcoe, which will reflect then the county's past budget. To amend paragraph 2 by adding the following: that the 2023 budget request from the county of Simcoe be reduced by $323,727, with an equivalent reduction to the tax levy to reflect the final budget approved by the county. A, that the budget for long-term care be decreased by $224,625. B, that the budget for children and community services be decreased by $30,680. C, that the budget for social housing be decreased by $88,157. D, that the budget draw from the County of Simcoe Capital Reserve to support provider loans be decreased by $286,273. E, that the budget for paramedic services be decreased by $224,625. And F, that the budget for Ontario Works be decreased by $41,913. 2, that the 2023 budgets for the County of Simcoe capital program be amended as following to reflect the final budget approved by the county. A, that the 2023 budget for the County of Simcoe capital program, paramedic services, capital project FI 1019 be decreased by $43,598, with $7,457 to be funded. Oh, actually, yes, I apologize. It's increased, actually. Increased by $43,598, with $7,457 to be funded from DC reserves and $36,141 to be funded by the Simcoe County Capital Reserve. B, that the 2023 budget for County of Simcoe Capital Program, Long-Term Care and Senior Services, Capital Project FI 1018 be decreased by $440,811 and reduced draws of $45,464 from the DC reserves and $395,347 from the County of Simcoe County Capital Reserve. C, that the 2023 budget for the County of Simcoe Capital Program, Social Housing and Community Services Capital Project FI 1020 be decreased or increased by $98,308 to be funded by the Simcoe County Capital Reserve. D, that the 2023 budget for the Lake Simcoe Regional Airport Capital Project FI 1028 be decreased by $11,092.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey.
Did you want me to speak to it at all, or Deputy Mayor?
If you'd like to speak to it, you can.
Actually, I'll be quite honest with you. I was just going to say it's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, the county has rejigged their budget, but I'll let Councillor Thompson dive into this deeper.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you so much, Councillor Thompson. And thank you, through you, Mayor Nuttall. I have spent a considerable amount of time looking at the county budget, specifically the community services and social housing portfolio. And I'm beginning to to question, have hesitancies, concerns around the value that we as a city are receiving for the funding that we are providing. If we look at the issue of homelessness in our city, to me, and I think we all know, it is getting worse, not better, yet we continually throw more and more money at the situation, and I don't think we're getting quite the change or outcomes that we are hoping to achieve. We heard a very moving deputation a couple of weeks ago, again, around the need for the warming center 24/7, and again, the request for an additional $300,000. I wonder if we're at the point where we need to start looking and having conversations on the root cause of the issue of homelessness, as opposed to continuing to invest more and more dollars. And we know the root cause, the lack of affordable housing, which we are addressing now with additional inventory, which will help drive costs down, and also ensuring that new developments have a proportion of housing that's deemed affordable or attainable. But the second element of the root cause, I believe, in which we know, of the 700 people that are homeless in Simcoe County, half of those are in Barrie, so 350 or so, I think, is what we're looking at. 70% of those claim that mental health and addiction is the cause for them not having a roof over their heads. Yet we don't have any deputations or much dialogue at all focused on what are we doing to improve access to mental health and addiction service within our city. So I'd like to know, and I sit on the Simcoe County Committee of the Whole, so I will hold myself accountable to this as well, but I would like to know where the county fits into that conversation. I know we received a presentation from Chief Greenwood, former Chief Greenwood, I should say, back in December, around the city looking at the development of a community hub that would focus on access to the social services and mental health services that are so desperately needed. I don't know where that conversation sits now. I don't know the role of the County of Simcoe in their involvement in that conversation, but I think we need to revisit that, see where it's at. Again, I don't know if it's the city's position to drive that, but certainly I don't want to lose sight of those conversations. And I also wonder and question, at what point do we look at the pros and cons of the city advocating to the provincial government to revisit the current tripartite agreement that's in place, that enables, I guess, the county to have purview over the community services portfolio, and is it at some point in the city's best interest to retain accountability for that portfolio? So I just want to throw that out there. I think, I don't know if that was a specific question or more commentary, but I think there's a lot more dialogue that needs to happen, because I'm starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable with just approving these budgets without having some of these significant conversations that need to be had. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Deputy Mayor Thompson, are there any other questions or comments in regards to Deputy Mayor Thompson?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Nuttall. Just one thing, and maybe I misheard it. I think it was the 43,598 for capital program paramedic 2A. I think Councillor Harvey said decrease. I think it was actually increase. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
My counterpart here caught me.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to keep this decreasing everything.
Yeah. And just to say that this wasn't a council request of all this reductions and stuff. This was a housekeeping item that the county had indicated in their presentation and stuff. So I just didn't want people to think that this council was decreasing what we do contribute to our social services. So.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Rittman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I do also agree that this is basically housekeeping in that the county has made a change to their budget. But I wanted to echo Councillor Hamilton's comments, because the county is now in the process. They have hired a consultant to take a good hard look at their social services delivery, and I am very much looking forward to what that consultant is going to tell us, because I believe, and I think there's many of us that have real concerns about how the county delivers and what kind of metrics are used to measure success. And I think that's probably one of the big questions that we all have, is how does the county measure their success? I'm not sure that the city really really wants to get into social services, and I think that's a discussion for another day, and that is definitely something that the province needs to be involved in. And I think that there's a great deal of the social service issues that emanate from the low ODSP rates and all of those forms of payment that the province makes that just simply haven't kept up with the costs of living. So I think this is a very large question, but I think I agree with Councillor Hamilton that we really do have to start to drive this this issue, because I'm not sure that it is being resolved at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritma. Any other questions or? Thank you, Councillor Neguse. Councillor Morales, I think I've ignored you by accident a number of times. I apologize.
No worries. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. Mayor Nuttall, starts with a comment. It'll finish with a question. While this is a housekeeping amendment, I think it opened up a great ongoing conversation. So thank you for Councillor Hamilton for saying it with such poise. I've been beating the drum of value for dollar from the county for years. It's an uncomfortable conversation. I know they don't like when I ask the questions, but it's a necessary one. I actually ran into a mid-level County of Simcoe employee about 1.5 years, 2 years ago at the rec room who said, senior staff of the county don't like when you ask those questions. And that person told me, keep asking the questions. They're really good questions. So we're here to have the tough conversations. And that value for dollar, Councillor Hamilton, on what we get for different services is one we need to have if we want to change it. It's never an us versus them. The county, I truly believe that every single employee who wakes up that works for the county, whether it's in a frontline position or a managed position, wants to deliver the best product. But that just because they obviously come to it with a willing perspective doesn't mean that there aren't things to renegotiate in the contracts or things to change how we deliver those services. It's never personal. It's always about the end result. So my question for you, Mayor Nuttall, to the CAO. My understanding was that there was ongoing negotiations with the contract that we have with the county. Last time I asked about this question, I think it might have been October of 2022. So if I could just get an update, Mr. Prowse, about the stage at that negotiation table.
CAO Prowse.
Through you, Mayor Hamilton, to Councillor Morales and members of committee. Ms. McAlpine can provide the additional details, but there is a tripartite agreement between the City of Barrie, City of Aurelia, and the County of Simcoe providing these services. That discussion is ongoing. I believe the agreement is up this year. However, there are some clauses in the agreement which Council should be aware of. One of the probably the largest issues or hurdles is, in fact, if there's dispute around the agreement, it resorts back to the agreement. So attempting to exit an agreement which is legislated by the province certainly will be challenging, if not problematic, but it is ongoing, and I'll defer to Ms. McAlpine for additional details.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall and members of members of General Committee. CAO Prowse is correct. There have been ongoing discussions, even as recently as last week, with the county with respect to the agreement and the status. One of the things that the three parties to the agreement are doing is reviewing data with respect to how other jurisdictions that have similar agreements have apportioned their costs, what the cost allocations per service look like for each of the partners to the agreement. And we're continuing to review that as we move forward through those negotiations. But there is a fair amount of detail to go through. And as CAO Prowse has noted, the province has determined that the county is the service delivery agent for these for almost all of the services. And there are therefore that limits the city's opportunities without the province, the county, and Orillia all agreeing to any changes.
Councilor Morales?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ms. McAlpine and Mr. Press, for that. That was basically it, Mayor Nuttall. I think hearing the answers from staff, this might be a good opportunity for yourself, Mayor Nuttall, through to leverage the work that the Big City Mayors Caucus is doing. I know that there's mayors and other provincial leaders that are have made comments, maybe not identical to mine or Councillor Hamilton's, but similar ones in their own jurisdictions. So they might be 5 months, 5 years ahead of us in renegotiation that stays within legislative parameters. I'm never a fan of legislating through headlines, which basically means, you know, somebody makes a headline going, we're going to rip up a contract, and then it's a reactionary ping pong. So I'm never a fan of that. However, I do know that unfortunately, reactionary headlines sometimes move the needle. So if they've been able to move the needle in an effective way, and that's something that you can bring back from the Big City Mayors Caucus, Mayor Nuttall, because I know you're well respected in that group. I think our city's only going to be better for it. And however, that is appropriate for council to have input, which again, I don't know how the two can mend. I think that we as a council need to have a little bit more oversight about some of these partnerships.
Thank you, Councilor Morales. Are there any other questions or comments around the table? Seeing none, I will hold my comment for the actual main motion and call the vote on the housekeeping amendment. All those in favor? It carries. Back to the main motion. Are there any other amendments around the table? Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. To add the following paragraph to our service partners, that the contributions to Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority and the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority be limited until the ratification of Bill 23 are determined.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Are there any comments you'd like to make on that?
Thank you. Just within light of all the stuff coming down with Bill 23, the uncertainties of things and where these organizations are going to play a role in it, and you know what the city's going to need from them, and back and forth. So this is just more of a, you know, taking care of our own house before, you know, we just send money and then realize the provincial mandates. We don't need to rely on their services. So it's more just to keep in check until we get everything determined by the province.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Are there any questions or comments with regards to Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Actually, probably through you to Mr. Miller. With the amendment being worded in the fashion it is, I just want a little bit of clarity as to what it means by the funding being limited to them pending Bill 23. Like, I don't know that we have a hard date for Bill 23 to be sorted out, especially when it comes to the regulations. How do you take it as our CFO when it comes to the funding being given to these two organizations? Would it completely stop, or like how would you determine how much money you're going to flow to them as a result of this amendment?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, so we are heavily regulated as to what we're required to do, but the way I read the motion is we're not paying the full bill today. We pay quarterly. We don't pay the full amount. I think there's an expectation the regulations for Bill 23 hopefully will be out within the next few months, so we'll have a better understanding on that. So we wouldn't be paying this full amount. We'd be paying portion thereof as we're required to do, but it's not the full amount. And then we would report back to council over the next few months as to where things stand before we release any final payments.
Great, thank you. At least it provides a little bit of clarity. I just wanted to make sure it didn't mean that all of a sudden the tap was going to get turned off and cause an issue with these two funding partners.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson, for bringing this forward. I think that for the city, you know, Bill 23, while there's been, you know, information that's been put out as to what services the Conservation Authority may not be providing anymore, I don't think we have all the information on what services we're then going to pick up. And if we have a contract in place for services to be rendered by somebody else in another place that we're actually rendering here ourselves, we need to make sure that we're sending the funding to the right place, and potentially it could be ourselves. So, I think this is definitely a housekeeping item, but something that we need to pay attention to as things move forward. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And it's approved. We're now on the main motion. Are there any other amendments?
Are you back to the main motion or one more amendment, Mayor Nuttall?
Sorry, Gary, I was refusing to look at you there. Councillor Harvey, you have an amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. This is my last amendment for the night, I think. And this is amendment to balancing the tax to net zero, to add the following paragraph, that the transfer from the reinvestment reserve be reduced by $261,954 to balance the 2023 city operations budget, tax rate impact to zero.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. That's on the floor. Would you like to speak to that?
It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just readjusting the amount being removed from that reserve, so that way we still land at 0% tax on the city operations side of things.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Corser? No? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's approved. Councillor Corser? We're on the main motion right now. Yep.
Okay, I would like to separate the budget for the library from the motion.
If you can give me just one moment there, Councillor Corser.
Yep.
Okay, so the library, there's been a request for the library budget to be separated out from paragraph 2 in motion 23-G-022, which will be done, and I've confirmed with our team that we will be able to have the housekeeping done on that to make sure the numbers are correctly reflected in each of the paragraphs going forward. Are there any other questions or comments around the table that members of committee would like to bring forth? Okay, seeing none. I guess I'll take this opportunity to speak to the county. I didn't know whether I wanted to go to city council or not, or here. The county budget, it came down, and there is certainly frustration around the table. I have frustration. I actually ran on a platform that in the last election, requested looking at lessening the relationship with the county to kind of reflects on what members of council have been saying tonight. But there's a very complex issue, which is the province. And the province is, as we know, in every other aspect of our lives as city councillors, they are in control. And so if we want to have that conversation about the county going forward, we need to make sure that we're going to the province, because ultimately that's who will make the determination. With regards to accountability on budgets, there's 4 members of this council, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Riepma, Councillor Negussi, and myself, that sit on the Human Services Board and therefore participate in Committee of the Whole out at Simcoe County. I believe it's our job to hold the county to account. I believe it's our job to know the budgets in and out, to understand where the dollars are spent, and to demand as much accountability as we can through that process. The reality that we face is that the services we see on the ground are are very difficult to trail back to even that Human Services Committee, and certainly then to trail it back to this council table, or committee table in this case. So I would really, as we talk about these issues, I would really create some caution or ask for some caution in there. I don't want to set the expectation to either the public, the county, or somebody else that we think that we can just arbitrarily walk away from the table. We got to go and ask mom and dad. That's the province. And if that needs to happen, then this council needs to have a serious discussion about that in the future. So I would recommend that if that's something that we want to see happen, not tonight, not part of the budget discussion tonight, but it would need to be sooner than later, because we are, as discussed by Councilor Morales, entering a negotiating or in a negotiating year with regards to these items. So I'll leave that there, but I think it's a healthy discussion. I'm not sure that it is one that affects this year's budget, but it's a healthy discussion and one that I'm glad we're having. Any other last minute questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the vote on the amended motion 23-G-022. Those in favor on my right. Oh. So do we need a? So we want to vote on the library budget first. Okay, perfect. I'm learning every time we come back here. So we'll call the vote on the library budget first. Those in favor on my right? On my left? It's approved. We'll now vote on paragraphs 1 and 2. So the library budget now, paragraph 1? Perfect. Perfect, thank you. Those in favor on my right and on my left, and it's approved. We will now move to inquiries. Are there any inquiries on my right and on my left? Okay, seeing none. Announcements. We will then move on to the circulation list from March the 8th. Are there any items from the circulation list on March the 8th? Seeing none, we will adjourn this general committee meeting in order to give some time for members of council that I think had some questions they wanted to seek out from individuals in the public. I'll actually reconvene the city council meeting, or convene the city council meeting rather, at 7:30 p.m. This meeting's adjourned.